When I was little, my father was famous. He was the greatest samurai in the empire. He cut off the heads of 131
Hey everybody, Jerry Williams, aka Greater Sapien here. Thanks for stopping by. Today we are looking at a few more claims from Dubé's 200 Proofs Earth is Not a Spinning Ball. First up we have 131. NASA and modern astronomy maintain that the moon is a solid spherical Earth-like habitation which man has actually flown to and set foot on. They claim the moon is a non-luminescent planetoid which receives and reflects all its light from the sun. The reality is, however, that the moon is observably not a solid body, is clearly circular, but not spherical, and not in any way an Earth-like planetoid which humans could set foot on. In fact, the moon has been proven largely transparent and completely self-luminescent, shining with its own unique light. Okay, there are a lot of things here and some get brought up in other proofs, so I'll just focus on a couple aspects of this one. He says it is clearly circular, but not spherical. So he's saying that it's either flat or somehow curved only on the side we see. I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but those seem to be the only options. So this seems to be another circumstance where globe deniers don't want people to use their senses and experience. Because in our experience, circular objects that have this progression of shadows across their surface are three-dimensional spherical objects. But for some reason, we have to cast our observational experience to the side for the moon. And remember a few claims back in, 119, when Dubé said, "It is claimed that the other planets are spheres, and so therefore the Earth must also be a sphere. The shape of these planets in the sky have no bearing on the shape of the Earth beneath our feet." So why do they insist on this unnecessarily stupid claim that the moon isn't a sphere? Its shape doesn't affect the shape of the Earth by their own rules, right? But it's foolish of me to expect them to be consistent. But as we know, the phases of the moon display a partially shadowed surface that is completely in line with a three-dimensional object. Now, as you'll recall, Occam's razor tells us when faced with two equally valid scenarios, the one with the least number of unknown factors should be pursued. Dubé's claim is not an equally valid alternative to the accepted model, but even if it were, there are too many unknown factors in that explanation. If the moon is self-illuminating, why does it have phases at all? Why do the phases match perfectly that of an object with the sun as its sole light source? When you zoom in and look close, looking at the moon and see all the shadows of the small hills and mountains, and they all perfectly coincide with a light source that is the sun, how does the moon do that? And then there's the lunar libration, where we see some 58% of the surface of the moon, and it's revealed in a way that further emulates a three-dimensional object perfectly. How is that explained by a non-spherical self-illuminating disk? The moon being a three-dimensional object and the sun being its main light explains it all. Now let's look at number 132. The sun's light is golden, warm, drying, preservative, and antiseptic, while the moon's light is silver, cool, damp, putrefying, and septic. The sun's rays decrease the combustion of a fire, while the moon's rays increase combustion. Plant and animal substances exposed to sunlight quickly dry, shrink, coagulate, and lose the tendency to decompose and putrefy. Grapes and other fruits become solid, partially candied and preserved like raisins, dates, and prunes. Animal flesh coagulates, loses its volatile gaseous constituents, becomes firm, dry, and slow to decay. When exposed to moonlight, however, plant and animal substances tend to show symptoms of putrefaction and decay. This proves the sun and moonlight are different, unique, and opposites as they are in geocentric flat model. This is an easy one because there's no evidence for any of this at all. It's literally made up. While the first part of the claim is partly correct, the sun's light is golden, warm, and drying, preservative, and antiseptic. I say partially because sunlight can warm up an object, and warming something up can speed up chemical reactions, which would then not be a preservative situation. The claim about moonlight is actually just a claim about the decrease in sunlight and heat. It's silver because the moon is a grayish-white color reflecting the sun's light, and the sun's warmth can actually make it easier to start a fire, and campfires don't combust more in the moonlight. It's just easier to see campfires in the dark. All these claims about the effect of moonlight are just about the absence of sunlight. The very same things happen if there's no moon in the dark of night. Now, 133. In direct sunlight, a thermometer will read higher than another thermometer placed in the shade. But in full, direct moonlight, a thermometer will read lower than another placed in the shade. If the sun's light is collected in a large lens and thrown to a focus point, it can create significant heat, while the moon's light collected similarly creates no heat. In the Lancet Medical Journal from March 14, 1856, particulars are given of several experiments which prove the moon's rays, when concentrated, can actually reduce the temperature upon a thermometer more than 8 degrees. So sunlight and moonlight clearly have altogether different properties. So you all likely know that I already did a video debunking cold moonlight. You can find it here. In that video, I show through direct experimentation that the phenomena of cold moonlight can be explained by the process of radiative cooling. An object in the open sky will cool off faster than an object under the shadow of another object due to the heat radiating off of that object. For example, I placed thermometers in the moonlight and compared them to thermometers in the shade. Then I conducted the same experiment with the thermometers in the same positions on an evening with no moon in the sky. In both scenarios, the thermometers in the open sky read as cooler than the thermometers under cover. And since the cooling happened whether or not the moon was present, the moon can be discarded as the cause of the cooling. You cold moonlight people understand that, right? If the same cooling happens whether or not the moon is present, then the cooling is not caused by the moon. But let me take a moment to talk about the resource Dubé references here. The fact that he's referring to an article written 170 years ago tells me two things. He copied his claim from either Robotham or Carpenter, or both, and he doesn't have any modern research to back his claim. Let's look at the article in which Dubé claims particulars are given of several experiments which prove the moon's rays, when concentrated, can actually reduce the temperature upon a thermometer more than 8 degrees. The section he's referring to is on page 255 of the Lancet publication. In this section, there is a discussion about the reaction of plants to the changing temperature after sunset with the moon present or not present. And someone claims that there is a change in circulation in the sap that's obstructed by its contraction. So now I'll read. This explanation does not satisfy Dr. Lardner, who remarks that if it be admitted that lunar rays possess any sensible calorific power, this reasoning might hold good, but it will have very little force when it is considered that the extreme change of temperature which can be produced by the lunar light does not amount to the 1,000th part of a degree of the thermometer. So this guy is saying, well, some may think that moonlight has some heat, but it doesn't have very much. Upon this point, however, philosophers are at variance. The lunar rays have, according to the experience of practical men, a decided calorific agency. The gardeners of Paris assured Arago that in the months of April and May, they found the leaves and buds of their plants, when exposed to the full moon on a clear night, actually frozen, when the thermometer in the atmosphere was many degrees above freezing point. He mentions these facts as proving the moon's rays have a frigorific power, but that the largest speculums directed to the moon produce no such indications on a thermometer placed in their focus. So the discussion is, some people think it has a calorific power, a warming influence, and others think there is a cooling influence, a frigorific power. And this one guy says, people say it's cooling light, but if you concentrate it, it doesn't show any effect. And then someone rebuts that here, as it reads, Dr. Howard of Baltimore has affirmed that, on placing a blackened upper ball of his differential thermometer in the focus of a 13-inch reflecting mirror opposed to the light of the full moon, the liquor sunk in half a minute 8 degrees. Now, what was Dubé's claim about this article? Particulars are given of several experiments which proved the moon's rays, when concentrated, can actually reduce the temperature upon a thermometer more than 8 degrees. That's not what this article says. This says that there was a discussion going on back and forth where they didn't agree. This says that one person claims to have done experiments of concentrating moonlight and got nothing, and another person says they tried it and got something. That's it. No particulars, no peer review, no recreation of the same circumstances. Just one person saying one thing happened and another saying something else happened. But Dubé characterized it as if there was detailed scientific breakdown provided, when in fact it was just a brief recap of some people's assertions. And I guess that's just par for the course with Dubé, right? The mere act of stating something is to be considered evidence? Dubé is an idiot.
That's my job! That's what I do! I don't lose! I win! Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me on last night's victory.